Good morning. This is the Community Revitalization Show presented to you by RCI Community Funds. We are here to talk about how to help communities rebuild, redevelop, working with communities that we label disinvested, meaning that we don't want to put a bad label on them or say you're the responsible person for why that your community is having trouble. It's just somehow, some way, the markets, the economy has passed you by, and we want to get you back on the train so that you can enjoy prosperity with the rest of everybody. So, with me today, as I have a co-host, Stephen Schaff. Steve is in the middle in the blue, and on the far side, I have Devin Thorpe, who is our guest for this morning. And we'll be talking today about investing in small businesses and how that benefits local communities. With that, I'm going to give you a short background of myself. I'll pass it to Steve, and then we're going to turn Devin loose. And Devin is a powerhouse in this area, so you may have to put on your sunglasses or sit back a little bit from the screen because there's going to be all this power coming off of this. So, my name's Carl Dakin. I'm a member of the RCI Community Funds team. My background is acting as a coach and helping individuals, organizations, and communities raise capital and working through the entire process from front to finish. Steve, good morning. Please share.
Good morning. I'm Steve Schaff. I am founder of Community Vision Solutions, and through that process, we ran into a couple of folks and started RCI Community Funds. My background involves affordable housing development, community organizing, and anything that involves creating community wealth building within many underserved communities in America.
Great. And Devin is with Super Crowd, and I heard him do a short interview about himself the other day. If you want to repeat that, Devin, I think it would be very helpful for people to know that you're not just a good-looking guy, who likes to talk, but that you have this vast background in business and so forth. I think that's good for our community to know.
Yeah, I do host a show about social impact. We focus a lot these days on regulation crowdfunding and the opportunity for people to invest in their own communities. But my background includes running an SEC registered FINRA member investment banking firm. It includes serving as the chief financial officer of the third largest company on the Inc. 500 list one year. It includes serving as the treasurer of a public corporation, multinational public corporation. And I even worked on the U.S. Senate Banking Committee staff years ago. So I have a pretty broad experience in finance, pretty deep expertise. And I've now written 7 books and excited to be working on another one.
So, Devin, what got you into focusing on investing in small businesses?
Well, in a way, this all started with when I was running my investment banking firm. My very first client was working on setting up a crowdfunding site. We didn't call it that back in 1999. That was before all the regulations were there, and ultimately the business didn't work because the regulations just didn't allow it. We could see the technology could be used the way that we now use technology routinely for investing, but the regulation wasn't there, and we couldn't pull it together. But from that, the kernel of interest was sparked. I worked in my investment banking days helping small businesses a lot, helped to get some startups going and raised capital and venture capital for them, did some M&A. But along the way, one of the things that I did was to help a friend stand up a second platform that was designed to do crowdfunding type investments. And I remember at a time when I was doing well. I invested in some of those as an accredited investor. They all blew up. Nothing worked. But I was fascinated still by this process. And so when the regulations came out in 2012, and I was covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing for Forbes, I said, okay, this is something I need to pay attention to, and it became an area of focus for me, and I have stayed close to that space ever since, and it has become really my um, not quite, but nearly an exclusive focus for me as I look at how we can use um, all the benefits of being able to do crowdfunding, and of course, one of the primary benefits is the opportunity to build community, right? To support everything from the food truck on up in our own communities, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
So let's give a shout out to our audience. One of the things that I really appreciate about this format using LinkedIn Live and live streaming is we have an audience. We have people who are out there on the internet listening in to what we're doing, and they have a chance to comment or ask questions, to maybe sometimes guide our program forward, sometimes take it completely off the rails, but that's okay. We're in charge. We'll try to keep it moving forward. So we have a comment from Bill. Bill's one of our partners in RCI Community Funds. Thanks for being with us this morning, Bill. And hopefully you weren't listening when I was talking about you earlier. So then we have a new person this morning, Hong Sin Kwek, which I probably mispronounced, and I apologize for that. But good morning to Devin from Thailand. This may be one of Devin's fans. So thanks for listening in this morning. And as I said, you're in the audience. This is for you. So if you have a question or comment, please put it into the chat, and we'll be happy to talk about it. So Devin, what does it mean to invest in a small business? How does that impact the community? What's the nexus or the cause and effect that takes place there as you see it?
Well, it's sort of magical, right? Because there is a mythology in community development that if you bring in outside investment and you create a spot of prosperity. I think about the town where I live, Stockton, California. There's some neighborhoods where you can drive through, and the only thing that isn't blighted is the nearby McDonald's in a particular neighborhood or fast food chain. And you realize that, yeah, some outside capital came in, plunked down this store. They employ people at penurious wages, and they source all of their materials from who knows where. But none of that, the only local input is the penurious wages, right? So someone is working there in desperation because it's the only option. And they can't afford, to live. They can't. They're not prosperous, and no one benefits from that except the corporation or franchisee that happens to own that particular location. And if the franchisee is from 100 miles away, 200 miles away, there's no local benefit, none. Now let's contrast that. With a little food truck. So you've got someone from the local community that's going to requires capital a tenth, maybe 100th of what is required for a McDonald's franchise, right? And you stand up that business. He's going to hire 2 or 3 people, support his or her family, oftentimes her family, hire other people in the community at fairer wages with a more human approach. And using a community investment approach like yours or crowdfunding, you allow people in the community to participate in the ownership of that. So now you're not just lifting the boats of a franchisee and a corporation from far away. You are lifting the boats not only of an entrepreneur, a local entrepreneur who's spending the profits in the community, who's sourcing the materials for the food and on the truck in the community, and you're employing people in the community at fair wages. You're also returning capital to people in the community who are profiting from this business in financing. So yeah, it ripples, and if you can build a whole economy, a whole local economy around that, you create a thriving local economy that isn't taxed in effect by a McDonald's.
Steve, you work with so many different communities. I know you've got some opinions about the benefits of investing in local businesses. You think that Devin is on track here, or you're going to disagree with Devin?
Well, I'm not sure if I disagree with him, but I'd like to ask the question, Devin. You are an evangelist for the crowdfunding world. You've written books. You've got a great number of initiatives, but you're also an investor in small businesses. So, how do you prioritize financial versus social impact returns?
Well, I think it's a great question because I think both are vitally important. There are really, as I've identified them, there are three very important but distinct reasons why we need to make money from our investments, even when they have a social impact and a social impact intent, like building our community, right? The first is kind of maybe the most obvious, right? But if you invest $1 and you get it back $1.10, you can do it again, right? If you don't get the dollar back, or if you don't get the 10 cents back, you are more limited in your ability to redeploy, right? Second reason is closely related, but quite different. When you get comfortable that when you are consistent in using discipline to make those investments, and you see that money comes back to you, and $1 turns into $1.10 consistently, say, wait a minute, I've got this IRA over here that's got $96,000 in it. I could put that money into my community because, the stocks and bonds that's invested in, they go up and down. And I was in General Motors in 2007 and got nothing. And so you say, oh, wow, this stuff over here works better than what I was doing over there. So I'm going to put the money. So now you have a whole new source of capital available to allocate. Third reason. And this is in some ways the most important. But if I invest in a business for social impact, and that they had the most compelling plan in the world. They were going to save starving children and employ at-risk teenagers, and they were going to, and it's, owned by diverse founders, and maybe it's a triple diversity play, right? You got women, and you got African Americans, and and they're all LGBTQ. So I mean, you got all the reasons, and you say, okay, I'm going to invest in that. If they go out of business in 3 months, what's their impact? What good have they done? You might kind of feel good about having backed them, but they're having no impact. They're done. So you've got to scrutinize. It's painful in a way. It's painful, but you've got to scrutinize the investments to make sure that the companies can actually have a shot. If they don't have a shot, if they realistically don't have it figured out, they're not going to have impact, and your money's not going to help.
So Devin, we talk about the term community wealth, and we see that as you described it, you have to build wealth for the community to regenerate, to come back. And as you described it, if you put in $1 and you get $1.10 back, there's 10 cents of wealth that was not there before. And to make matters more challenging, if half the stores in the community are owned by people outside of the community, they're all exporting that wealth outside of the community, which means you need more local stores to offset that. Otherwise, this community is in a constant bleed out. It's losing wealth all the time. And that's where we see a lot of the communities that we're looking at now that for one reason or another, they've slowly pushed all the wealth out of the community to the point where the community is like, we have very little left to work with. And so we're trying to figure out how to bring money into that community. We see it as investment, and along the line you described, it has to be a profitable model because we want to build wealth, not simply keep us at this level that they're at today. That seems better than, I guess, the alternative, but it's not getting us where we want to go. So when you look at a business, what do you think about in terms of what makes it look like it's durable, sustainable, growable?
I hate to oversimplify, but there's one really good clue, right? They're already doing it. And oftentimes companies, entrepreneurs that need capital, that have an opportunity to grow, are already in business. They're already doing something. The food truck that's looking to convert the operation to a fixed brick and mortar location needs a lot of capital to do that, but you've already proven the ability to cook, produce food. You've got a customer base. You're ready to go. That's a business. There's good evidence there for that, right? Oftentimes, a capital need is relatively small, right? You have a restaurant and they say, if we had 50 grand, we could open up the back patio, double our seating space when the weather is reasonable, right? Because a little outdoor heating, a little outdoor, some shade in the summer. And we're there 9 months out of the year, we're outside. Wow, that's pretty cool, right? So, you can just, looking for a business that's already in business and profitable is a first easy way, right? There are other clues, right? But someone who's been there and done that, that's a good sign. A team that brings a lot of perspective, a lot of skill. There's one thing I get nervous about with teams, that I confess, right? Is if they're not all really committed to the project. They've all got something else going on. No one is in peril if the business doesn't come together. Those are people who, they can all just walk away in your life. So you gotta, be careful. But yeah, there are signs. And you got to spend the time. There isn't an alternative to spending the time. And Carl, you join me regularly in the Impact Cherub Club where we're doing this, right? We're looking at deals, and you see the benefit, I think, of having a team approach and different perspectives. One person will do the deep dive, but you still have a dozen people in the room who can say, I've tried that kind of food, or I've lots of different experiences really help. So yeah.
So go, Steve. No, go ahead with your question. I'll come back and interrogate Devin more thoroughly on his answer.
Well, you mentioned the Cherub Club. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is and why you established that?
Yeah, so the Impact Cherub Club is our impact investing via crowdfunding group, and we exclusively look at opportunities to invest where people can invest as little as $100. So if the minimum investment is over $150, we will not consider it. And so we're doing that. And since we did that, we started almost 3 years ago. So we've made dozens and dozens of investments now as a group. Our impact is starting to add up. We're starting to see the deals come back. It's really kind of exciting now to see, the progress some companies are making. There's one of our early investments that's doing another follow-on raise right now. It's kind of exciting, but it's a lot of fun just to come together, work together to sort out and screen investment opportunities. And there really is power in working together this way, and it's fun. I think the regulars genuinely enjoy this process. It is, I think, genuinely fun. We enjoy one another and the time we spend on this. But in some ways, it is a simplified alternative to a fund. Right. So what you're doing is in some ways the next level of sophistication, pulling people together, aggregating some capital from the community to invest in the community, and layering on some professional management, professional due diligence, so that you get the benefits of a collective effort to build the community and have impact. So it's in some ways a simpler approach to what you're doing.
Yeah. So Devin, if I recall correctly, joining the Cherub Club is free. Is that right?
We now charge a big, huge fee of $5.95 a month. But if you want to come to a meeting or two before you pay, we welcome you. Come check it out. But yeah, you can check it out you can sign up at impactcherub.com. Our registration page is a little weak. I got to work on that. If you can't figure it out, just send me an email. And that's on the screen there. I noticed Devin at thesupercrowd.com, and we'll add you to the list. So we'd love to have you.
Yeah, this is one of the features we have with this studio is we can put up your contact information. You being a special person, I was trying to figure out how to get it neon, and a little bit brighter than this, but this is the best I could do.
It's great. You did a great job, Carl.
I'm a member of the Cherub Club, and I guess I am paying that monthly dues. I'll have to go back and check. I was paying attention. But what I like about it is some investment clubs, they create a pool of money and then they vote the money in or out as a pool, as a group. In this one, everybody is allowed to make their independent assessment, and they can vote individually, which actually is enabled because of regulation crowdfunding. Before, a lot of times people go, well, the minimum investment is $25,000. And you go, well, I don't have $25,000. If I got all my friends together in a club, maybe we could get up to $25,000. But Reg CF and your rules, it's $100. So I'm building my collection, my portfolio of these investments. But this is something that we've recognized is that we'd like to have 100% of the money invested in the business come from the community in which the business exists, because that keeps 100% of the profits in the community. But so far, we recognize that we need to bring in outside money, what we call external investors, to do that. And Steve, I know you've been working on the concept of activist being a source of external investors. Could you kind of dive into that and explain what you're working on there?
Yeah, one of the things that I really admire about the crowdfund concept is it's small, it's broad, it's very local, it's democratic. And then a few years ago, when I really started investigating, and that's how I got plugged into Devin, I began to realize that as wonderful as this is an opportunity and a new way to raise capital, and it's growing, it's still in its infancy. The bottom line here is the number of investors that are aware of this is, in my opinion, very small. So as a national grassroots political organizer, where we work with outreach to literally hundreds of thousands or millions of people who will donate to their favorite politician or pay for a cause, not expecting anything back because they've got certain principles they want to see be fulfilled. There's no real bridge from the crowdfund world to this, shall we say, giant prospect group. So part of what we want to do with our initiative with RCI Community Funds is aggregate capital from all sorts of sources. But the crowd fund is something that's very important because, again, it's very democratic. And the idea is to work with the national network of investors who are okay with moving $100 or $1,000 into someone else's community, because it's better than keeping it in their mutual fund where it's actually investing in the prison industrial complex or the fossil fuel. So that's a big network that can be exploited. And because of our network and backgrounds, we'd like to do that. And I credit you, Devin, with inspiring me to figure out we need to find more investors, and they're out there. We just need to build these bridges. So it's going to take a little time, but we've got some great partners and players. And of course, the idea is if you don't have something in your neighborhood that's ready for investment, put a few bucks in some other's neighborhood, and then I bet you'll find opportunities in your own neighborhood of that little coffee shop that wants to expand or set up that you could benefit from. And then that's how you start getting this into the investment world dialogue. So it's, I think, growing. And
yeah, and it's amazing
getting the word out.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much a small amount of money by traditional standards can make a big difference in one community. Let me give you an example. I lived in Jacksonville, Florida for about 18 months. I have to confess, I really miss Jacksonville. I live in Stockton, California. Love Stockton. In so many ways, this is the favorite place we've ever lived. We lived in great places. We love Stockton. Great town. But in Jacksonville, there was a foundation. What's it called? The Jesse Ball DuPont Foundation. It's sort of a community-focused foundation. It's led by a woman who built. She helped to build Global Giving, which is a donations crowdfunding site built 25 years ago, before we used the word crowdfunding, to do crowdfunding for international projects and to access capital in the United States. Great nonprofit. It's a tremendous organization, and they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, she's now leading the foundation in Jacksonville. And she allocated a relatively small amount. I'm thinking it was either high 5 figures or small 6-figure amount to co-invest on honeycomb credit with in local businesses. And you know what's happened? Jacksonville is one of the most active places for crowdfunding in the country. Because of that, it might have been 50 grand, right? I mean, it was a small amount of money. But I invested alongside her with my little investment in a local vegan restaurant. And I still get my loan payment checks from honeycomb credit that so it's so cool. It is so cool, the impact that a small amount has. So imagine that you guys put together even $1 million fund for a town like Stockton, or a town like, I don't know. I think of a suburb maybe in Denver, right? And I don't want to call anybody out, but there are disinvested suburbs in Denver, right near you, Carl, and in DC. Amazing thing, Steve, is that fund of $1 million devoted to local small business investing can really catalyze amazing impact. Because you won't be the only investor in a deal typically. And when you work to make sure that you're not the only investor, you really are going to lift all the boats.
Yeah, no, that's a
Very cool.
good invitation for me to explain what we have in mind. We are working to design a community investment fund. We're starting with all the long and hard work that was completed by the National Coalition for Community Capital, and which they've been working on for years. And we're now looking to create a series of funds that are dedicated to individual communities. And we are intending to create a pool of money, somewhere between $1 million to $5 million per community, that we'll raise money into through Regulation CF crowdfunding. But within this framework, when we go into a community, 60% of the money is going to go directly into ownership of real estate. And this is required to conform to the securities regulations and so on. But in that, we are looking at putting money into residences, into commercial buildings, into community buildings. But each time we do that, we want to allow the tenants in the buildings to become owners of those buildings. And then 40% of the money will go into small businesses within the communities. And there, our primary goal is to help them learn how to raise capital, how to go out and raise more money. And every one of those should be a candidate, Devin, for the Cherub Club to consider. And you're correct. If you take $1 million as a minimum fund, and $400,000 is then invested into local businesses. And then each of those businesses is given an opportunity to double, triple, quadruple, or 10 times that minimal investment by raising more money on their own merit. This is ballooning up into a whole lot of money any way you look at it. So we see that if we do place our money carefully, strategically, with the right help and assistance into each of these individual businesses in the community. And these will be brand new businesses. Some will be ones like you described who are already in motion. We're also going to be working with some recruitment of some businesses into town so we can get immediate job impact. And these are working with other organizations, allies of ours, who already have a plug and play business model where they're not inventing it from scratch. They've already got it up in 10, 20, 30 communities, and they're just looking for more places where they can put their good knowledge to work and create jobs. So we see that, as you described it, every business is like a brick in the wall. It contributes to the strength of the community. The more bricks that we can put together, it becomes a wall instead of just a pile of bricks. And collectively, this community now has a foundation upon which they can build. They can start accumulating wealth within the community, and they'll reach a point where the community will start taking off on its own and be all that it can be. So there's lots and lots of communities out there that need this kind of help, and creating a better pipeline, a better conduit for people like Steve described to put their money to work to help these individual communities is what we're all about. So we're looking to do what we think we can do. We're trying to team with people who believe in what we're trying to accomplish. But like all good things, we're just getting started. So we have to walk before we run. But one of the things we're talking about doing is we're planning to set up a nonprofit to act as our educational arm to share the knowledge we have that we already have and everything that we learn as we go through this process to try to help all these other communities who are in this situation get some traction and get something going in their own backyard. So there'll be lots of announcements over the next few weeks as we start unrolling some of these things. Looking forward to sharing that information. But back to some of your comments about investing in local businesses. How do you get people, as Steve described it? There's the vast majority of people have no knowledge that they have the ability to invest in their local business. So how are you trying to overcome this vast opportunity? But it's not the kind of opportunity that you're happy to see.
Well, it's a multi-pronged approach, right? And as you know, I'm passionate about this. So I I spend too much time talking about this. I'm boring at parties, right? Because I want to talk about this. And but the reality is, I'm doing everything I can. So I'm pushing the message on social media. I've got my show where on television, we're talking about it all the time there to a growing audience of people. We've got a newsletter, growing audience of people subscribing to the newsletter, thousands and thousands. So we're reaching a lot of people that way. But I have not stopped using a very personal one-to-one approach. I wrote this book last year, and I think both of you contributed meaningfully to this effort to get this book done. How to make money with impact crowdfunding, and I carry that around with me. There you go. You got your copy right there. So yeah, thanks, Carl. You're both in the acknowledgments, as I recall. I carry a copy of that with me when I go to my Rotary Club meetings, and I leave a copy there with somebody every week, because I want to make sure that we are bringing people into the fold. And I hand these to people I know probably are never going to read them, but if 1 in 10 actually reads the book and says, "Oh wow, I didn't know, now I know," right? It's really easy. And it's easy to start small. One of my favorite parts of the book is how to do this with $10. How to do your first investment with $10, because everyone can do $10. Everyone. I don't care if you panhandled to get the $10. You can scrounge up $10 and do your first investment. So no one is left out of this wealth building tool, and you can have impact, and you can see the impact from the get-go. And so I just get really excited. But it is the effort to proselyte this message it's not just one strategy, it's every strategy, because I'm firmly convinced that this is the way the economy should work. And now we've set it up so that from a regulatory standpoint, it does work that way. Now we've got to make it work operationally, right? And that requires more investors. And when we have enough investors, entrepreneurs will come, because it'll be so easy to raise money, right? There'll be people standing there at the ready to provide some money. And I just get excited about this. It's just great. It's just the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, so Steve and our team, we've been talking about this idea that in a community, all too often, you'll see the outside money show up and the outside money leave, and the people in the community get to watch it almost like a circus or entertainment, but they don't have anything in the game. And so we're coining the phrase stakeholder to stockholder. And Steve, if you could explain a little bit more about what that means and how that fits into Devin's vision.
Well, stakeholder is really investing in your community, frankly, before outside market forces come in and kind of take over your community. And that, of course, causes things like displacement, gentrification, terms you've heard before. So the idea is, if you could literally put together small parcels of capital, then you could literally be owners of the community you want to help build. And again, that's what you've been working on, Devin. Education is really very important with all this. But the idea is getting these communities before outside forces can really absolutely just displace and change communities. And that's a tough thing to do, because you have to be far thinking. You have to recognize which communities are vulnerable to these kind of demands, and then you have to motivate. And as you spoke earlier, Devin, you have to educate people that you can actually invest in your own communities, and that coffee shop could be your local coffee shop versus a national coffee shop coming in, which then changes the entire community. Bill has a pretty good question, not only about education, which I think, Devin, you did answer, but one of the questions he has involves as he's asking you to explain a little bit more about some of the regulations that would help accelerate the growth of this kind of capital.
Yeah, it's the
There you
Bill
go.
and I are both on the board of directors of the Crowdfunding Professional Association, and the CFPA recently published a list of nearly 20 different policy changes that it advocates, and there isn't any I don't approve of, at least cautiously. There's some I'm really excited about. And I happened to share a post just yesterday at superpowersforgood.com where you can read some of these in detail. But among the key proposals is to simplify some of the requirements for disclosure, especially financial disclosure for small issuers. And so we're looking at three things in particular. First would be to raise the limit for requiring a financial review. And I sometimes wonder if the policymakers even understood what a review is when they wrote the policy requiring it for such small offerings. And the reason I ask that question is review sounds like an informal process. You just have the auditors do a review. But of course, that's a defined process. It's basically half an audit, and it's expensive to get a review, even of a small business. But if you've got a small business that's been in business for a long time and the books are a mess, forget it, right? It's going to be thousands of dollars. It's a huge barrier because you got to pay for that before you do your crowdfunding, right? So if you're struggling as a food truck operator trying to figure out how to get money, and you think, I could go raise $100,000 on crowdfunding, and but if I had 150, I could do X. Well, now you need a review, and the cost of that review is going to be $5,000 easy. And you're like, I don't have an extra $5,000 lying around. That's why I need to do crowdfunding. So it's really a dilemma. So raising that limit, the CFPA has recommended we raise it from 124, where the current limit is, to 250. But there was the Securities and Exchange Commission's Small Business Capital Formation Advisory Committee recommended raising it to 350, and informally the CFPA said, yeah, that'd be a good idea. Let's make it 350. So that would be great. A second policy change there would be to allow the entrepreneurs to use their tax returns instead of requiring them to put together GAAP financials if they are not required to do a review. And you say, well, what's the difference? GAAP financials are better because, they show the accruals and all that stuff. Yeah. But most small businesses are only doing tax level accounting. And so they have their tax returns. And if you go to a typical bank, or if you go to get an SBA loan at a bank, you're only required to provide the tax returns. They get it. They understand the difference. They know how to read them. And everybody kind of does, right? Because everyone files a tax return, right? So we kind of get what tax accounting looks like. It's not that mysterious. So allowing people to use their tax returns would be a huge step forward. Eliminate, because it still has to be done right. And then the third is there's the review requirements still apply to newcos. So let's say you're a startup and you just form your entity in July and you're going to be raising money in October. You have to have a review or an audit of that new business with no transaction done before you can do your capital raise. That's silly. That's just silly. So we want to get rid of that. So those are just some examples of the kinds of things that we think we can tweak to really make this marketplace hum.
We went through that with the local Colorado version of the Crowdfunding Act. And after the first 3 years, we finally pushed it up to $500,000 as a threshold. because as you described it, why are you paying $3,000 to $5,000 to have somebody tell you that your books are okay, not anything glorious or anything you want to brag about? But if you're filing your taxes every year, why are we setting a higher standard than the IRS for disclosure of financial information? And as you pointed out, every business I know is on the cash basis for reporting, not the accrual basis. And even trying to translate your books over into accrual, even though you're supposed to be able to flip a switch on QuickBooks and it can give you both routes, it's never ever worked for me. So we'll see that. Bill has another question. Bill wants to get to your secret sauce, which is how do you build your super crowd of investors? How do you get to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of investors? Because we, the public, want to know. Actually, we at RCI wants to know, but the public may also want to know.
No, this is the key question, right? And there are a few people that I think have this really figured out. But there's a little venture fund called Renew Venture Capital that developed an important thesis for us, I think. And what their thesis is that your social mission becomes a magnet that helps you expand your community, right? That you don't have to rely on the people that are already your customers, friends and family. But if that social mission can appeal to thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people around the country, it changes the game dramatically, right? And so you've got to find a way to convince that group that you are a tool for that social mission and that you can deliver a return on the capital, those two things. You've got a real opportunity, right? And they have proven this now with a number of companies. And so what they do is they invest up front a small amount of money, and they're really genuinely at risk for the costs of doing either a big Reg CF round or a Reg A round, right? And so if you're going to raise $5 or $10 million, there's thousands, tens of thousands of dollars that has to be spent, maybe $100,000 that has to be spent up front. So Renew Venture Capital is putting that money in up front so that you can then do a very sophisticated raise and raise millions of dollars from the crowd. But part of what that anticipates is that you are going to have to spend money on advertising because these people aren't in your newsletter, right? And so they're honing in on this message that there is a business opportunity here that accomplishes a social mission that, hey, we know you care about because of your patterns on social media and elsewhere on the internet. And we can track you down using some of this nefarious spyware, right, that marketers use, right? So that, so like I invested in Aptera. I've talked about this a lot, but they were continuing their capital raise long after I invested. And so everywhere I would go on the internet, I would see Aptera investment advertising, right? And so they were using some of these sophisticated tools to market to anybody that encountered them along the way. So that's the kind of tools. It's expensive. It's tricky. It takes. There is a combination of art and science into delivering those messages and refining the testing, the polishing. But there are companies who are making it work, and I think the linchpin piece for a lot of them in our community is lining up on the purpose, right? The mission.
Yeah, we have talked about, and we're working on building our own what we call social impact scorecard, it's so it would be SIS, not SOS, hopefully. So, but in that regard, when you see a small business, they're doing this good in the community, but all they think, because they've been taught and trained this way, is to report their profits. They're not talking about the jobs they created. They're not talking about their contribution to local charities, how their team and staff are engaged in the community, making things happen in the community. And we are advocating that every business we work with will have their own scorecard, will make this part of who they are, that part of their public presence, so that one, we can determine how much impact we had collectively, but each individual business now can tell its story, as you say, how are you helping? What are you doing? And that story, I do think, resonates way more with people than the story about profits. Everybody wants you to make a profit. We're all in agreement in this group anyway, that profits are good. But we also recognize that most of the small businesses we work with are not generating so much profits that they're going to be attractive to angel investors or private equity firms. They're just not going to be at the top of the stack in terms of that. So the people have to see some other benefit that they get from this, which the social impact is what it is. So we're looking at using jobs, new residences, new commercial space. We're looking at having an impact on raising the average median income within a community from a collective standpoint. And some of the data that the Census Office uses to measure wealth. So this is an ongoing thing. We're in the middle of trying to figure out how to tell our story better, but also to attract investors, as you described it, to make them aware that by making an investment, we can measure the impact of their investment at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, it's critical. You gotta get that measurement, and so I love the sophistication you're bringing to that, and that's one of the advantages of a fund over individual investing, right? Is that you can bring some professionalism to the process that it's difficult or even impossible for an individual to do, especially an individual that isn't doing this full time. So yeah, there's some real advantages to your fund approach, and I especially admire your vision for making that a fund that ordinary people can invest in, starting with $100, because that's how you're going to go about this process of lifting all the boats. The tide doesn't lift all the boats if some of them are anchored to the seabed, right? They just are inundated by a rising tide, and that happens, right? That's what gentrification is, right? That's I'm sitting in my house, all these things happened around me. Now this neighborhood is really nice, but I can't even afford the property taxes. I can't afford to buy. Yeah, there's a grocery store, but it's a Whole Foods, and they're charging twice what I was paying for groceries before, right? So I can't even go there. I'm still driving across town to go to the Safeway or something. It's that problem, right, is a problem, and so your approach helps to alleviate the impacts of so-called gentrification and becomes a genuine community-driven reinvestment program, redevelopment program, where you can lift all the boats.
So, Devin, I'm curious, and I appreciate your insights on what is really a pretty complicated kind of process that requires a lot of moving parts. But just a simple question I have now is, what was one of your favorite, not necessarily in terms of return on your investment, favorite businesses that you never thought you'd invest in?
Well, the irony is, I know at the Impact Cherub Club, we have gotten a lot better at really genuinely scrutinizing the deals. I remember the first 6 months we met, we approved every deal. Right. And it was just driving me nuts, because I'd say to the people, we really need to scrutinize these. We need to, and oh, but there's impact. And so but one of those early investments that we made was right after the, difficult botched, awful withdrawal from Afghanistan. There was a company that was raising capital on WeFunder, and it was called, oh crap, dang it, I'm forgetting the name, but they made snacks. You could buy them on Amazon, right? They were already up and running, but their whole model was to source the raw materials and finish them in Afghanistan, employing only women, right? Because women are so disadvantaged. They rarely have their own money. It's hard for them to get jobs. And so this company was employing women to do the whole packaging on these natural snacks. So it's typically just nuts and things, dried fruits that were grown there in Afghanistan, packaged for sale in the US. It's shipped to the US and sold on Amazon and elsewhere. Delicious products. You still buy them. And the great thing about this one was it was probably 20 months later. I'm logging into log into my email, and I get this message. And it said, we've sent you 123% of what you invested, and we're done. We're done with you. And so I hadn't even figured out in those days really to be thoughtful about this, but it was a convertible note. So it had an interest rate, and they had the option to redeem the note rather than convert it to equity later on. And so they exercised their option to redeem the note, and they pointed out that their interest rate beat the S&P over the holding period between my investment and they're paying me back. They'd beaten the S&P, and I just thought that was so cool. I had beaten the S&P. I'd beaten the stock market with this super high impact product. I'd bought some of the products themselves. It was just such a cool thing. And I would never, when I looked, I would never say, I'm going to be investing in Afghanistan. and so you just never know, right? What's going to work. And, I've invested in more food trucks than I can count now. So.
Good.
It's cool. It's cool stuff.
So you learn a lot through your investments then.
Oh yeah. That's one of the key things I would tell people. I do tell people all the time, right? Is you got to start, because you get better at this, right? You begin to figure out. You'll amaze yourself at how the questions that seem almost hard to form become habitual and become clear as you actually start doing this work, right? You start investing, and you're going to go from thinking, I don't understand, to, I get all this. I understand all these things. I understand interest rates. I understand the difference between a safe and a convertible note. And I understand boom. All this stuff begins to make clear sense. And you're going, now I know what to look for. Now I know my due diligence is up an order of magnitude better, because I'm expert level, right? It's sort of like, it's like playing video games. It's really the same thing, except that you're playing with real money, and it's so much more impactful and so much more fun. Yeah. So you just get better. You do. And it's cool.
Real people's lives.
Yeah.
So, we're coming to the end of the show today. Bill has praised our efforts here today. Thank you, Bill, for
how about you guys?
Telling us what a great job we knew we were already doing, but we'll take the positive comments anyway. Devin, you make so many great observations, and with the good work that you're doing, that everyone can invest. Anyone over the age of 18 can invest. It's not limited to wealthy people. If you invest, you learn more about how businesses operate. You learn more about how your community works. You learn about how helping those small businesses is actually helping yourself if you live in that community. And even at a larger global level, helping small businesses in another neighborhood can help you. It does help you in some way or another. So it's really good to get everybody aware that this is an opportunity that they can participate in. It's also to let them be aware that there are communities out there that need their help, and not as a charitable gift, not that we're discounting the good work of all the charities that are out there and the ones we're working with and teaming with, but a for-profit sustainable wealth building model is what's necessary for these communities to dig out of the hole they're in and to move forward. So we're looking forward to working with you and others and everybody in the audience as RCI Community Funds goes forward. And we appreciate everyone in the audience for being here today. Any last comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with us, Steve?
Thanks very much, Devin. You're a real connector and weaver, and we really look forward to working with more Devins out there, because as we bring all our expertise together, we will accelerate our impact, because it's coming.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
We appreciate Devin, and throw up again this invitation to contact Devin and work with his group. As he's described, it's affordable by everyone, and the learning curve is pretty awesome. I think that, as he described it, it's fun and it's educational and it's low cost. What's not to love about that?
Yeah.
So,
and we have a crap ton of free content too, right? So you don't have. There's a lot there you don't have to pay for.
Right. Anything else you'd like to add, Devin, before we call it a day?
Thanks for having me. You guys are doing great work. I'm excited to see you succeed. And 20 years from now, we're going to get together and talk about all the impact you guys have had, and it will be amazing. Amazing.
We'll put that on our calendars for sure.
Okay, let's do it.
And some of us will still be around here in 20 years, but we'll have to see about that. Anyway, thanks, Devin, for being here. Thanks, Steve, for co-hosting with me this morning. Thanks to our audience for listening in to the Community Revitalization Show presented by RCI Community Fundings. We'll see you next week.
Teamwork and all.